Hello and welcome to another episode of the Gohndim and Gilmore Show. Today's episode is brought to you by the Boston News Network, the only new age digital newspaper that brings you only the facts. Hello everyone, we're joined here tonight by our good friend Anti-Depressants, Anti for short. Anti, welcome to the show. Introduce yourself to our audience.
Hi everyone, my name's Anti. I am a full-time employee at a research institute, and I am a part-time PhD student in economics. I have my master's degree in political economy and my undergrad in economics. I know Gohndim and Gilmore from the Discord server, and love to chat with them more.
Awesome, thank you so much for being here. Gilmore, take it away.
Yeah, sure. So before we really get into the crux of this conversation about economics, I figured we start with Christmas since it's on everyone's mind since Christmas was just the other day. Auntie, what'd you do for Christmas?
I did a few things. So Christmas Eve was very chill. Hung out with my girlfriend for most of the day. 25th, slept in a little early. We ordered Thai food because, as everybody knows, those restaurants are typically like open during the holidays, which is nice. And then we sat down and we watched Muppet Christmas Carol, which is still epic. Then we watched this Silent Night movie with like Keira Knightley. It's not very upbeat. It's actually a very depressing movie, but it's Christmas themed. And then I watched The Grinch, the Jim Carrey version.
So it's very weird you bring that up because before we got on the podcast, my wife confronted me about our Christmas episode, which she listened to on the way to go to the movies on Christmas Day, and wanted me to ask Gohndim if he's ever seen the Muppets Christmas Carol movie, which I've never seen. So it's very funny that you bring that up.
I've seen it, but is she asking because she thought it should have been in my top three, or what was her issue?
Yeah, she thought definite top three.
Yeah, it's 100% top three.
Really, I don't think it's top three. Like it's fun. Here's my real take on the Christmas Carol stuff. I think it's just so overdone. Like you see it in the one from the 80s, which I think is probably the most well done one, except for like the creepy female ghost. You see it in the Muppets. You see it in the animated. Isn't there an animated Jim Carrey one? I think there might be a Mickey Mouse one even. There's like fucking 7 versions of a Christmas Carol. I almost said a Christmas Story. I think there's so many of them that I can't enjoy any of those stories individually that much anymore, I guess.
Christmas Story for me is probably number 1 or 2. I'd have to hear like arguments for something else.
I'm trying to remember. I think I put it at like 3 just because it's ubiquitous with Christmas. Like when I was growing up, it was on, I think it was TLC and maybe even like 2 other channels, like basically 24/7 for like 8 days of Christmas. So I think it resonates Christmas for me. I think I put Jim Carrey's How the Grinch Stole Christmas as number 1. I think it's just a really good, I hesitate to even call it a remake, like a live action of obviously a really good story. And it's so funny. And I don't know, I think that's done really, really well. So I think it's probably the most fun Christmas movie. We also talked about Jingle All the Way. Have you seen that, Auntie, with Schwarzenegger?
I haven't, no.
Oh my God, that's a low key underrated Christmas movie. I feel like, and not just because it takes place in downtown St. Paul, and is filmed in Minnesota, but it's just such a good fucking movie. Really funny. Yeah, I don't know what else I'd put up there. I think there's a bunch of good ones. There's a bunch of really bad ones too. Like they remade, was it A Christmas Story 2 was it Netflix a few years ago? That was fucking absolute dog shit.
Apparently, like A Christmas Story, I was doing a deep dive with my girlfriend. It's like part of like this full like universe that this author had created. So like all of the movies that were created by like as an extension of the books were technically all interrelated with each other and in the same like it's sort of like how Stephen King will like throw in, you know what I mean? Like a monster
it's like the Marvel
from a different
universe.
book. Yeah.
I did not know that. I didn't even know who the author is. Yeah, that's interesting.
Also, I also realized that because it's late and I'm tired. So It's a Wonderful Life is 1 or 2 for me. A Christmas Story is probably like probably a 10, top 10, but I couldn't make it in the top 3. No, not for me.
Yeah, I've never seen It's a Wonderful Life, or what's the other one that people always talk about is A Miracle on 34th Street. Never seen that. One of my resolutions going into next year is to watch a bunch of movies that I haven't seen before because I just don't watch a lot of movies. So,
well, the funny thing with like It's a Wonderful Life is like now that I've studied a bunch of econ, it's same thing with Mary Poppins. Like the start of that movie is a financial crisis. It's a run on the bank.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
So you can relate to it.
And it's like a run on the bank in like the most obscure and like rare way possible, which is the bank is fully solvent, but like the bank is fully solvent, I think, in Mary Poppins, and people think like there's just a rumor that gets out that people can't get the money out of the bank, and so everybody just bum rushes the bank.
Is there a run on the bank at the start of Mary Poppins too? I'm so confused. I haven't seen that in forever.
Yeah.
Interesting. What the fuck?
They're trying to get their toppins, dude. They can't get their toppins.
Gilmore's people really does control Hollywood.
Well, not necessarily, but on a somewhat similar note, have you guys seen the movie Knives Out?
Yeah, well, I've seen the new one too. The new one was really good.
Oh, sorry, I haven't seen the new one either. I'll just say that this is the movie that everyone always brings up to me when they say that female actress is really hot, and I can never remember what her name is or what she plays in. But yeah, that's the context of that movie. I have seen it though.
Ana de Armas?
Yeah. People always bring it up, but all the discussions where it's like, who are the top 5, hottest women? It's like this woman's like named all the time. I'm like, who is that again? They're like, oh, Knives Out. I'm like, okay, fine, yeah.
So not to give any spoilers, but there's an obscure thing in the law that if you're in someone's will but you kill the person, you're not allowed to inherit from that person. It's called the Slayer rule. So we're watching the first movie, which I've never seen before, and there's a part where like someone's will comes up, and I was talking to my wife. I was like, "Oh, there's this thing where like if you actually kill a person, you don't get to inherit from them." And like 5 minutes later, it's like a big part of the movie. And I was like, "Oh shit, I didn't realize."
Is that actually that obscure though? I feel like I don't know.
I feel like you don't really like. I mean, it makes sense logically, but like most people don't know the actual law that's like in place to prevent that from happening.
Well, I know nothing about the law, but I heard about the Slayer rule well before that. Maybe I wasn't looking to kill anyone for the record, but
No Fed posting, by the way.
no Fed posting.
And Gohndim, you're not my will anyway, so don't worry.
Well, I was going to put you in mine anyway. I think before we talked about more economics topics, we've talked about this a little bit in the pre-show. Any good RTSs? I know you're a big fan of the genre. I know you, Merles, and I played Age of Mythology. What is it called? I almost said Retold, that came out last year.
Yeah.
Any good new ones on the market? And what was your favorite game of 2025?
So I'll address the RTS question first. The state of RTS, unfortunately, at the moment is dire and tragic. What inevitably happened was StarCraft 2 sort of dominated the space, and due to the mismanagement of Blizzard Activision, it continuously started to kill the community to the point where they wouldn't even allow like the grassroots elements to pick it back up, which is like a notorious Blizzard problem. We saw this with WoW Classic, we saw this with Warcraft 3 Reforged, we saw this with a bunch of other things where they're just like incapable of like maintaining a good thing for long. There were a couple of really good ones that came out, and then a couple of disappointments. So the good ones that came out were Zero Space, which is a co-partnered project with Katz, who's a former team owner in StarCraft 2, was a former professional himself in StarCraft 2, sort of like upper middle rank in terms of being a pro. And then the other person on the project is Scarlet, who is definitely like an upper tier pro, also a Zerg player, was an RTS player. And it feels very much like a new and fresh RTS where they have both like a hero mechanic that doesn't like fully dictate the game, but it's nice to like add in order to like help with pacing. Some of the factions are actually quite hero dependent, so it's very nice to see like very different styles between races as opposed to the copy paste of like, oh, you've got the Protoss, oh, you've got the Zergo, you've got the Terran. The one that was also promising was Battle Aces, but that unfortunately got canceled, which I was disappointed by. The former owner, like leader, was like a former Blizzard employee. For and then Trash Game was sadly the Frost Giant Studios garbage heap, where they effectively, in my mind, just swindled a bunch of money from me and a bunch of other people who contributed early on to the project. The project is still garbage. The mechanics are awful. They've now changed the entire infrastructure in terms of like what each race does, and then also what like the feel of the races are. Even though like the three main races are just again Terran, Zerg, and Protoss copy paste. Game of the year. So I played quite a few really good games this year. My like standard answer is probably gonna be Clair Obscur, because I also am a huge like RPG fan and really like single player RPGs if they're done well. The combat system in Clair Obscur is very good because in a lot of like turn-based games you just get bored. Like you're just spamming the same shit over and over again until you finally beat the boss. And then like alternatively, I've been playing a shit ton of Warcraft 3 again. And there's still a scene there, and it's like kind of interesting. And there's not a ton of players, but like I still get to play at like a pretty high level, and it's nice to like have the nostalgia kick. I also replayed the campaign, and Warcraft 3, like Reign of Chaos and TFT campaigns are some of the greatest video game campaigns ever made.
Do you think it's better than the Age of Mythology campaign for RTSs?
Oh, 100%, yeah.
I'm really torn because like I don't know. I have the original like box sets of the Warcraft 3 RTS games just in the other room next to me. But I also, man, I love the Age of Mythology campaigns. I think for me
Yeah,
that's the pinnacle of
so
RTS
good.
campaigns. Yeah. I don't know. The
Yeah,
story is
the
just
mythology campaigns are incredible. A lot of RTSs, especially early RTSs, have sick campaigns.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just utterly incredible. Nowadays, it's just, oh, like what can we like put on top of the slop that we just made? Like,
Do you get upset when people call like the Total War games RTSs, or do you consider them kind of like a healthy blend of RTS and I guess grand strategy?
I think that the Total War games are definitely RTSs, and especially RTSs when it comes to like competitive multiplayer.
Hmm. The only thing I really want is a Total War Star Wars edition. I think that'd be absolutely sick. I didn't play any of the Total War Warhammer games. It's actually been a while since I played any of the Total War games. Medieval 2 is my all-time favorite. The Romes are very good. Even like the smaller ones like Attila and I can't remember, they got a couple other spin-off, Shogun and whatnot. Those are really good, but I haven't played them in a while here. But I really would die for a Total War Star Wars
Did
rendition.
you ever play like Star Wars Empire at War?
Yes, yes. That game has not held up. I actually replayed that, I don't think this year, but the year before. I think it had a lot of really good ideas, but like if I'm trying to remember, I think the land battles were pretty awful. The space battles I think were epic. I think the land
Yeah,
battles were pretty
I
terrible.
agree. I agree.
Because if I remember that game, you could like upgrade your space station and like the progression in the space battles was a lot of fun. Yeah, I have played that. Man, was there another Star Wars game similar to Empire at War? Or am I just hallucinating and maybe mixing, Battlefront 2 or something? Yeah.
Yeah, so I was just looking up RTSs because I didn't know what that was until just now.
Oh
I
my
think the
god.
only RTS I've ever played was a game called Populous for Super Nintendo. Ever hear of that one before?
Yeah,
Oh
of
my
course.
God. Gilmore's like
Appar-
58 for the
yeah, it
record.
apparently came out in 1989. So,
Oh my God.
huh.
I don't know. There's just not a lot of good. Oh, there was that Star Wars Battlegrounds way in the. I think Battlegrounds. I think that was like a. It came out around Age of Empires 2, I think. But yeah. Anyway, probably should get to some economics topics here. We promised a little bit of a shorter episode here. Gilmore punted over to me to ask most of the questions because of the optics reasons of his heritage and ethnicity, I guess.
Thank you for that.
Probably where I want to start, and this kind of dovetails into a number of issues here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much time you spend on Twitter. I spend more than I probably should or need to, and particularly because I'm like involved in some of these alternative investment communities and have been for many years, whether it's Counter-Strike or Pokemon cards or even crypto back in the day, and particularly now silver. something that's talked about all the time is how drastically the money supply has increased, particularly over the last 20 years. I think it's gone up, $100 trillion or something, depending on how you measure it and what time period you pick. Does that concern you? Is that why you think is contributing so much to inflation and some of the asset prices increases across all these sectors? Just what are your general sentiments on the money supply and where we're at right now in the stock market and I guess the world economy in general? Is it healthy?
I would say not healthy, but with caveats. So to do the TLDR, the primary issue when people talk about inflation is that they use the term inflation improperly and outside of the context of the discipline. So inflation isn't, for example, your bananas go up $1, or like the cost of tuition or the cost of tuition to go to the university or a college is like increased by $2,000. Those are just relative price increases. Inflation is a macro phenomenon. It's a increased rate in the price of goods and services across industries and across sectors, not just within industries and sectors, across industries and across sectors. And this is why we see when inflation hits, it starts hitting in certain sectors first and then inevitably moves on and then proliferates, sort of like a disease. Now, the fundamental question, like with the inflation now, is, well, like, could we have done something to prevent it? So there's two issues happening simultaneously. One is how we sort of like finance our spending these days, and the other is like, well, what do we do in the event of like crises, and was this the right tool, and was this the right trade-off? So there's a really good paper. I forget the author's name. You can probably find it. It's called The Three World Wars. And he looks at World War I, World War II, and COVID. And he looks at how we financed each of these events. And for World War I, it was primarily us issuing bonds and us taxing with very little money printing. World
And
War
when you say,
II,
just to interject so I
yeah.
understand, when you say us, is he looking at this primarily through the United States context, or like globally, does he also look at the impact of how the world kind of funded these efforts?
He's looking at the United States specifically. So in the
Gotcha.
United States specifically, we mostly did bonds and taxes. World War II, similar, but we did a little bit more money printing. COVID, we issued basically like no bonds, and we've taxed very little, and we printed heavily. And the argument for printing heavily at that time was, well, we can't get like these spending packages through, and we can't get these spending packages through with people wanting to purchase U.S. bonds, or the Fed is going to refuse to purchase the U.S. bonds traditionally up to a certain level. And so, well, I should recant that last statement. Primary concern was we can't get these things through. We're concerned about like the private sector purchasing these bonds. We might need to have the Fed purchase these bonds. And then we can't tax people because they're experiencing COVID and the lockdowns and all the economic anxiety and all this other stuff. Taxing people when they're already like down and out is the quickest way to start a revolution. And so they said, okay, like we need to, in their mind, we need to save the United States economy. We need to finance, say, like the stimmy checks. We need to finance all of these other government programs to right size us at least long enough so that we can make it on the other side of COVID, and then we'll deal with the problem on the other end. The fundamental issue, though, became that, well, they're ignoring the trade-off, right? And the trade-off is you're going to see inflation. And so inflation happens. The analogy I like to use is like a bathtub. You fill your bathtub up, right, with water. But you've got these things that prevent you from having the water spill over and outside of the tub, which is your drain. And in the United States, the drains are increased productivity and increased demand for money.
Hmm.
But what ended up happening was, well, we did have increased productivity because COVID, right? And we did have increased demand for money because otherwise people would be saving and not spending, right? So what ended up happening was, well, the water started filling outside of the bathtub. And now because we have additional like spending obligations, like the increased like government expenditure on like just normal fiscal policy, and the fact that like the government is now having another conversation for the 80 millionth time about how we should manage our debt, and the answer appears to be just kick the can down the road again. Inflation is probably going to exist so long as we're not increasing interest rates sufficiently enough to bring it back down again. That presents another trade-off, which is if you bring the interest rates too high, that makes it harder for people to do business and to take on loans, and that will cause the economy to slow down. Causing the economy to slow down means more people are out of work. More people out of work means people are pissed off.
I think what maybe this is covered in the paper, but and maybe this is my improper understanding of the economic history of the United States, but you know, is it true, or would you agree with me that relative to how should I phrase this? The United States came out of World War One pretty good relative to the rest of the world. Same
Yeah.
thing for World War Two. Actually, we probably were the biggest benefactor of that. You know, maybe there's some isolated cases, but this was a war that I think at our peak we were consuming like 33% of our GDP. Maybe it was higher. I can't remember what the number was, but something that costs $4 or $5 trillion in today's dollars. But we
Yeah.
stood to benefit greatly from that, given that most of the other developed nations were wiped out economically and industrially, particularly Germany, France, UK, Japan. Is that the case for COVID? Do you think that history is going to look back on this and say the United States withstood this better than the rest of the world? Where do we rank relatively to the other countries post COVID, do you think?
I think we're doing much better than a lot of the other countries post COVID. Um, like, for example, the UK lost in the early stages of COVID, I think literally a fifth of its GDP, and has not recovered. And we have. We recovered like in full years ago. And so that component to me is like a good question for like how we should run the counterfactual and whether or not this is like the right call. I don't know the answer to that fully. The thing that bothered me during the time period was mostly like, if you genuinely believe that this is going to save the economy, you need to own the consequences and then be open and frank with the public about it, because you're going to experience inflation. This is
Mm.
obvious.
Do you think that was a big failure of Democrats, leading into the 2024 election? Because I know it became kind of a meme, Bidenflation, and I memed about it as well. But
Yeah.
it did seem like a lot of people were ignoring the reality that a lot of regular Americans were facing day to day. What I've always said, and I'm not sure how true this is, but when I talk to people around here, and I come from a liberal state of Minnesota, my family is primarily concerned about the price of a gallon of milk, a gallon of gas, what it costs to fill up the propane tank in the winter, all the like prices you see day to day. And it doesn't really matter how strong the macro indicators are in the economy. If people are upset about these things, and particularly with the increase of utility bills the last 4 or 5 years, it seemed like Democrats were really downplaying inflation, and really it wasn't something that they had to own entirely, because a lot of this started under Trump during COVID, and it was obviously a global pandemic. Do you think that they were complicit, I guess, in losing that part of the electorate in 2024?
Yeah, I think there's a component of that that's true. And the component that I think is absolutely true is uh, that the Democrats refuse to own their decision making. And again, like if a Republican were to walk up to like a Democratic politician and said, "Hey, you shouldn't have done everything that you did during COVID in terms of like the government expenditures component of it, not necessarily the lockdowns or some of the other measures," the Democrat, if they like had the info on their side, or like were just really like precautious and like try to like play off the other person's intuitions, would say something like, or should say something like, hey, what's the alternative? Was the alternative give them nothing? Or like what level of spending would have been appropriate? Because the alternative, like in our view, would have been the entire US economy goes into the tank and we have a depression.
I mean, there's also the fact that that's the people that were like the more MAGA Republican, and not just like true conservatives like neocons, would also have to confront the fact that Donald Trump spent tons of money when he was president during COVID as well.
This too, yeah, and another factor too, like, and this goes to one of Gundam's points in that question is, well, like people are talking about how good the economy is. It's like it's going well, but it could be doing much better. And one of the ways that it could be doing much better is inflation, because we haven't been at the stable 2% target for a while now, and as long as we're above that target, well, inflation isn't just like a one-time adjustment. Inflation is a rate increase. And so every time that we're like, even if we bring it down from 3.7% to 2.7%, okay, sure, but that didn't actually drop the actual core inflation. That just slowed down the rate.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's things that matter. Like even I still go to the grocery store now, and it's like 2 bags of groceries. It's like fucking. You're lucky if it's under $40 or something. It's ridiculous. I didn't notice it early in COVID. I'm fairly well off and wasn't really paying attention. I never really pick something off the shelves at the grocery store and say, "Oh, this is $3.47 or something." I just don't care. And then I started noticing eventually that it was much more expensive than I thought it was going to be. I don't know.
You know where, like, I know this is like a anecdote and it's kind of cringe, but we're in kind of a bad spot when McDonald's is starting to hemorrhage customers because prices are too high.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you the last time I've actually gone to McDonald's.
I think that was honestly my way of confronting inflation for the first time. But obviously, like groceries went up, so obviously that was a larger bill there. But it's really just going out for lunch during work and seeing how much increases in like your Chipotle and places like that over that time span was kind of crazy to me.
Auntie, question I had for you here before the show. Talk to me about how Jerome Powell's done, I guess, during his tenure here, and then also why do you think Trump is obsessed with trying to fuck with the Federal Reserve? It's just, I'll just lay this out for me. I'm obviously not an expert, but I've always thought that Jerome Powell's done a pretty good job. I watch a lot of his press conferences. He seems to be very, well measured, and I think he's done a pretty good job. And I just don't understand for the life of me why Trump is obsessed with wanting to fuck up the economy.
So up until like this term, if you had asked me, how do you feel about Jerome Powell? I would say, he's kind of a mid-Fed chair. He's okay. If I could name like the really like amazing and great Fed chairs who are just out of this world, even if I disagreed with them on some things, like they're brilliant people. Like I don't necessarily agree with Bernanke on everything, but Bernanke's a fucking genius. Janet Yellen, same way. Volcker, all these people. Jerome Powell was just like a guy who followed typical like textbook advice. And then this term happened, and Trump repeatedly sought to fire him. And you have old man Jerome standing at the podium saying, "Yeah, we've already consulted our lawyers. It would be illegal for him to remove me," which is absolutely correct. And he just stood on business. So he went up from like a mid chair to like an upper tier chair just off of that, because you can have your own personal opinions about whether or not we should have a Fed, or whether or not we should have like a more market oriented like free banking system or whatever. That's a conversation that can happen. But if you do have a Fed independence is the most important thing that the Fed can have, because they control something that no other agency or entity does to the same degree or capacity. They have the ability to radically influence the money supply and effectively keep on their own personal sheets, outside of the sheets of the United States government, in reality, a pool where they could effectively generate infinite money.
I think kind of related to that and the increase in asset prices overall. I mean, does it just concern you, I guess, how high everything is right now? I mean, are you surprised that we're at a record high stock market? I know I mentioned my pet investment, silver, record high silver market. Does it just surprise you that everything right now, except I guess crypto, I guess dip down, is everything just seems like it's mooning. You look at like the Schiller PE ratio. You look at just the fundamental PE ratio of common stocks, and it just seems to me like everything's so fucking expensive right now. Like, where do you even put your money to invest?
Well, this is like one of the things too, is that if you inject a lot of money into a system, people will find places to put it. And this is a situation where like okay, we have 4.3% GDP growth this year. Like people will look at that and they'll be saying, oh, that's really great and awesome, really outpaced inflation, like all these other factors. Like, but like if you drill into like what is GDP, it's consumption plus investment plus government spending plus net exports. Well, investment fell uh, by I think it was like 1%. And the primary drivers of the increase in GDP were increased government spending and increased consumption. And you
Yeah.
pair that with like people now having like increased credit card debt because of the price problem. You have increased amounts of people who are getting their cars repossessed because of the fact that their budgets are tight. There's a serious disconnect between like what's happening like on Wall Street and what's happening on like your day-to-day average street, and that's that for now at least. In Wall Street, I think, and this is a conjecture on my part, but this is from conversations with other people too, like work in the industry or like working in some of these larger firms that are doing the trades. They genuinely believe that a lot of the stuff that Trump has like said he's going to implement and has tried to push through executive order are never going to pass through the Supreme Court, or he's just going to back off entirely. And once a lot of those like things inevitably do get implemented, you're going to see huge problems, not just from like the beliefs that people have in their heads and how they're translating to reality, but in terms of reality now having to confront these people's beliefs. Because if, like, for example, you implement, I don't know, 15% universal tariff, let's just throw out a number, and that tariff is actually implemented, not only do the primary inputs to the industry get impacted, so let's say steel, like you put a 15% tariff on steel, everything downstream from steel is now impacted. And for every steel job you're saving, for every like increase in profitability to the steel industry you might be producing in the near term, in the long term, you're losing all those people who are building the cars, all the people who are building the washing machines. You're making sure that people can't even necessarily afford a lot of these things when they've gone through the full supply chain, and it's a mess.
I was kind of
So
hoping that I would feel that impact here in the renewable industry and get a Christmas layoff and take 6 months unemployment or something. But yeah, I don't disagree with you that when things are good and asset prices are high in one area, people will flood to other markets to try to make money there. But I think some level that is healthy and there's like increased, I'm not sure if you'd
yeah,
call that like increased price discovery in some of these collectibles markets. But it scares me when I go to like a Pokemon or a card show like that and people are like, oh yeah, I sold my Bitcoin at $140,000. Now I'm investing in Pokemon cards or something. Or like, it seems like when things are too good and people get too greedy and, things are pumping for no reason and all these people have all this money and they're trading in real gains for now paper gains, that just everything is so high right now that just, it's a little scary to me. And the type of money that's being thrown around in these different weird niche investment opportunities, I guess it's a little scary. And just the general level of the stock market and the AI bubble, is it not a bubble? I don't know. I just don't know where I'd put my money right now if I wanted to make good money.
It's really, you made a really good point earlier, which is like, let's suppose that like prices are high in a normal world, right? Well, that's a signal to people. It's a signal to consumers to potentially like defer consumption or not consume at all, or to limit. But it's also a signal to suppliers. And if you saw like that there was a lot of money to be made, for example, like selling Pokemon cards, well, that's an arbitrage opportunity that you as an entrepreneur can capture. You can capture that value, you can make a hefty profit. So the fundamental question, like whenever prices are this high, is, well, what's preventing the prices from falling? What's preventing people from entering into this market, assuming that there's profit to be made here? Uh, is it the case that there's like some other thing that's like basically fighting against them? Or is there something just, and it's just like not technically possible or feasibly possible, and then there's not actually a profit opportunity here? Or is it the case that, for example, with like say the tariffs, you're being actively impeded from being able to lower those prices?
Again, I don't disagree with anything you said there. I think the context, the nuance I'd like to add is that I think that the signal sometimes is either misinterpreted or the lag
Yeah,
time being able to interpret it or sorry, correct for it is not helpful. So, like in the context of my Pokemon cards, the Pokemon Company International announced very recently they're opening up a brand new facility, I think in North Carolina or something. They're going to increase production by 33% or something, and it's going to take another year and a half to get those rolled out. So it's going to be too little, too late. With the silver market here too, prices have gone up. I think it's 170% now year to date, and that, from what I'm hearing, and no one really knows this for sure, I guess. There's a lot of real idiots that invest in silver. You heard it from me first, and I'm one of them. There's not really that correlation in like industrial demand. A lot of people are blaming this on like
yeah,
solar panels and AI and computer chips and stuff. Not enough industrial demand to account for this price increase. So I'm worried that sometimes the signals are misinterpreted and you just don't know who to believe. But I definitely. And then another one that came to me was like housing, for example. So
yeah,
you mentioned that people are like delaying their consumption, and I'm not sure if you like the term of people consuming housing. But a lot of people in the last 4 or 5 years have, not been able to afford a home because of price increases,
yeah,
combined with rate increases. A lot of these people have already delayed their consumption of housing. And it doesn't seem like there's really been that signal has been there that, these people can't afford houses. We have a housing shortage. Depending on the market, things are just absolutely ridiculous. I don't I haven't seen any meaningful steps for that being corrected. And so I don't know if we're in a place because everything's so high, if it just feels like you can't do anything, if it's just too hard to break into some of these markets. Obviously, no single individual or single company is going to be able to correct some of these things by themselves. But I don't know if there's just an ability to correct some of these big things because everything's just so fucking expensive. Does that make any sense?
that makes sense. I think housing is actually a perfect example of what I was effectively describing earlier, and like what you need to do when you're analyzing these cases. And that's um well, why is it that housing is so expensive? Well, it's so expensive for some of the reasons that you've described. Uh, well, okay, so like why aren't people building more homes if there's a profit to be made here and there's high housing demand and not enough supply? Why isn't the supply there? Well, it's really because of how we've unfortunately, and I think in retrospect, doing the analysis evilly, created our housing market in the United States, where we told everybody you need to own a home. We encouraged home ownership, and then we encouraged people to treat their house as their primary equity vehicle, investment vehicle. They had a ton of equity in their homes, and then what do they do as voters when there's an apartment complex that's going to be put up next to them, or like a bunch of other homes that are going to drop their property values? Of course they're going to fight it. Of course they're going to fight it because they don't have like investment accounts. They have their house that's worth 800 grand.
This kind of like, I just want to touch on this really, really loosely because I don't want to get into any of the economics of this book or the lack of economics in this book. But did you notice, I'm sure you did, the pushback to Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson's book Abundance? I'm curious on two things. One, if you read the book and how you received the message, if you thought it was a interesting message or not. And then two, I guess, what did you make of the criticism of the book?
I have read the book. I don't know. So there's something I do appreciate and like about the book, and that is the reintroduction of increasing supply into the political conversation. Because previously, if you talked about supply side constraints, you would be called like a supply sider. And we can go into whether or not I think there's even such a thing as just like pure supply side economics. But you're called a supply sider, you're called a Republican, you're called conservative, and then in a lot of conversations, especially like within like the more progressive leaning circles and political conversations, you are sort of foisted out. But housing fundamentally is a lack of supply problem. How you generate that increased supply, I think, is the primary distinction between Ezra and I. So Ezra would be way more comfortable, and he says this in the book, that he wants to not only get like the government out of the private sector's way, but he wants to get the government out of the government's way. He wants the government to effectively like reinstitute a New Deal 2.0, where the government is able to build like massive housing projects, infrastructure, and all these other things. And my retort to that is going to be, well, we have all of these like knowledge problem and concerns where the government doesn't actually know like where to allocate resources half the time, and doesn't have the same processes, say, the private sector does. And it is a special institution and entity, and should limit its role. And it should actually be constraining itself, and actually should, in some senses, be doing less. Because what it's effectively done previously is it's created a series of unintended consequences through the policies and then tried to shore it up, but they could just deal with the foundational problem, which is that they meddled to begin with.
I have just one quick comment on that, and then Gilmore has a question, and we got to wrap it up here. I just found the criticism by a lot of lefties at Abundance to be so shallow, and
It's super pathetic.
It made me think that none of them even read the book, because it all seemed like copy paste of the same critiques. Like, this is actually a class struggle. This is actually the rich people. This isn't a local zoning issue. It just seemed like they didn't contend with anything in the book. And I thought the book was like, it was meh. Like, it was fine. It wasn't, it's what I expected it to be when you title a book called Abundance. And it's written by Derek Thompson and Ezra Klein. There was a couple cringe moments in it, but overall, I thought it was like a fine book. And in your critique is far deeper than anything I'd heard come out of any retarded dipshit lefty's mouth. So Gilmore, sorry, I know you had a couple questions before we wrap up. Take it away.
I just want to comment on that very quickly, and that's is so I don't forget it. So yeah, I get the leftist critiques, but I don't agree with the leftist critiques. Some of the leftist critiques are just an extension of like a baseline framework. So good example of this is, well, it can't possibly be like the voters' fault. Like, it can't be the fact that democracy is actually, in this particular instance, because of our past decisions, leading people to vote in their strict material interests and not give a fuck about the poor and the homeless. No, it must be like BlackRock buying all the homes. And you know what? BlackRock actually owns very little homes in the proportion of like total home ownership. And BlackRock benefits from the fact, because BlackRock is just one institution. It doesn't own the votes of like everybody in a specific community or city. Those people are the ones who are preventing the apartment complexes from coming up. And if they allow the apartment complexes to come up, guess who's fucked now? It's BlackRock.
My theory on it is that the people who are socialists that are actually speaking about these things are actually just multimillionaires who are actually just NIMBYs themselves, which is why they don't like the book itself.
There is a component of that too. So the socialist G.A. Cohen, who wrote like Why Not Socialism, and he has like the Locked Room thought experiment and a bunch of other things, like came from like the analytic Marxist tradition, more so normative, not very positive, was a philosopher. He had a strong affinity for lowercase c conservatism. And that actually was a direct extension of some of his views that he took from Marx. And so, like, for example, there was a huge debate. Well, this is probably a better way of explaining this. There's a huge debate between liberal feminists and Marxist feminists. Liberal feminists said, hey, like, women, go out there and like be a girl boss and like take the jobs and then become like everything you want to be in life and join industry and participate in industry and all this other stuff, right? We don't need to have the man working for us. We can work too. The Marxist feminists were saying to liberal feminists, whoa, hold on there, buddy. You want women to be wage slave cucks like the rest of us? like the men? No. This is bad. This is breaking down the cultural fetters that are important, and those cultural fetters include like man, woman, child, family unit, where one family member has to work.
It's almost like these groups have like an end goal, and they just try to find a way to reason their way to that end goal versus actually trying to find what's most beneficial for society. But let's not get into that right now. So my question for you is a little bit lighter than talking about the economic collapse in the United States. So my question is, and it's a topic we've discussed before, why do you hate Lina Khan so much?
Lina Khan has the two qualities when in combination I cannot stand. I'm okay with people being smug to an extent if they can back it up.
Right? I think it's being a woman. Sorry, go ahead.
Obviously within reason. No. I love women, okay? Anti-misogynistic.
We all love women here, by the way.
Yeah. You can be ignorant. I'm ignorant on a bunch of things. I spent my life studying like obscure shit. But if you asked me to like fix my car, I could change the oil, I could change a tire, right? But if you put me under the hood and told me to fix my engine, I'm getting a mechanic for that, right? And I'm not even gonna pretend that I know what the fuck I'm talking about. But if you're smug and ignorant, then it's intolerable for me. Just absolutely intolerable for me, especially when like I know that you're full of shit. And so Lina Khan wrote a very famous article while she was at Yale, talking about how Amazon needed to be antitrusted and how economists had effectively put the blinders on people by advocating for what this thing called the consumer harm standard or the consumer welfare standard. And we needed to broaden and expand it. And we needed to broaden and expand it in the way that Louis Brandeis talked about broadening and expanding it, where we care about market concentration and bigness for bigness's sake, not that in the standard monopoly model, the monopolist is causing genuine harm because they're increasing price while simultaneously reducing quality. You could be Amazon and be massive, and you could lower prices while simultaneously increasing quality, and that wouldn't be sufficient for Lina, because you're Amazon and you're engaged in all these other practices that she considers to be problematic. Now, for me, like as an economist, like you're going to have to convince me that the consumer welfare standard is not a good standard that we should use. And you're also simultaneously going to have to convince me that a lot of the things that she wants to use as replacements for it are grounded in like something real and tangible, either theory or empirically, in terms of like economic theory or empirics. And she hasn't done that. Instead, what she's done is she's engaged in a series of cases, some of them legitimate, some of them illegitimate, to the point where, again, we're going to the horseshoe meme. Two people really love Lina Khan, in particular. One of them is Zoran, who just recently took her on as part of his administration in New York City. And the other one is J.D. Vance, who said that she was his favorite FTC chair, and really, really loves her. So I don't know. Like, it's very unfortunate. I think that she's in the positions that she's in. She seems like a smart lady, so I'm assuming that either this is utter bad faith on her part and she has some ulterior political agenda, which I can guess which it is, or she has not taken the time necessary to read anything in my tradition with any care whatsoever. In that case, she's utterly incompetent and should not hold her role, and she should be immediately like discarded in the public eye.
So now I'm kind of curious. What do you think her ulterior motive is?
I think fundamentally that with a lot of people, they have a specific political ideology, and then they just sort of grab the econ that they think supports that ideology, instead of letting the econ guide what ideology they choose. So I think that fundamentally she is a socialist, which I think is descriptively true. And I'm not using it pejoratively. And she wants to achieve a lot of the same things that, say, Zoran wants to achieve, or AOC wants to achieve, or Bernie wants to achieve. And she thinks that the system is not operating the way that she wants it to operate. Therefore, she's going to use the weapons of political power to the greatest degree possible to achieve that result.
I think TLDR, just be very skeptical of women in positions of power in our modern age.
Like let's use Zoran as an example too. Like Zoran, on his website, advocates for the full decommodification of all housing. That's his real position. Like he's open about his real position. The rest of it is just like, what can they do? Like, what can they achieve?
Mm.
And what it seems like what he thinks he can achieve for now is increasing the amount of like public housing units in New York City and financing that with municipal bonds.
Mm. I think it will be very interesting to see what he actually is able to accomplish, which I think is going to be very, very little. I think his government grocery stores was just look, okay, well, let's see how it plays out, all right?
The immediate one that he's not going to be able to achieve most likely is the minimum wage increase, because New York is one of those weird states where New York City cannot raise its minimum wage without the governor signing off on it.
It's also really high already in New York City, so I don't know how much higher they could even make it at this point.
Auntie, I know we covered a lot of ground here, and there's some topics that we had on the list that we're not going to be able to get to. We're pushing up against another guest here. Would you? Hopefully, you had a good time. We thank you for being here. Would love to have you back. We have another, like I said, a bunch of topics that we weren't able to get to. Anything final that you want to say? Things you want to shout out? Things you want to promote?
Yeah. Quick shout out to Gilmore and Gohndim for inviting me. I want to say one quick thing, and that is something that we are probably going to talk about at a later date, but I wanted to just prime it up here. People need to stop using jargon terms from specific disciplines in like common parlance while not understanding what those words or terms mean. So you see this a lot with like philosophy terms in like debate, where people call something a fallacy that isn't a fallacy, or they'll actually use the correct term, but they won't actually like the fallacy that they're using won't actually be applicable to the conversation that's been going on. Econ has this all the time. And so, for example, people will talk about like externalities. Well, the externality is, let's say Gilmore and I decide to start up a tire factory, and then we produce a bunch of smog from our tire factory, and the smog pollutes the air, and Gohndim starts breathing it in and gets a bad lung, right? He's got the tiny Tim cough. He's on crutches now.
Oh my God.
That
Sounds
is that is a true externality. Gilmore and I are selling tires to people. The cost to Gohndim isn't priced in. We need to figure out a way to compensate him, or we need to figure out an arrangement where like our property rights are respected. Externalities are not Auntie decided to talk to Gilmore and Gohndim today, therefore overall productivity in the economy dropped by 0.0001%. That's not what that means. You need direct harms.
That actually raised one other thing that we can talk about in our future episode. Just to tease it here, I tend to think that land value taxes seem to be pretty retarded. I'm not sure what your take is on them, but we can get into it in a future episode. I'm curious to see what you say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate the shout out to the G&G podcast. We're very happy that you were able to join us, particularly on vacation. Auntie, thanks again and have a good night.
Thanks, buddy.